In the quiet corners of our lives where conflict does not roar but simmers, we encounter them. The ones who test the stillness of our spirit, not by force but by friction. Toxic people are not always storms. Sometimes they're the wind that tries to bend our branches with whispers. But what if these encounters are not accidents but invitations? What if each difficult presence is a note in the greater composition of our becoming, teaching us grace not in victory but in restraint? You see, life is not a battlefield, it's a symphony. And we are each instruments tuned by challenge, refined by resistance. In this music, silence has a sound, and choosing calm over chaos is not weakness, it's wisdom. To outsmart a toxic person is not to outwit them, it is to remain whole in their unraveling. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remain unmoved and let the universe compose its masterpiece through you. You ever notice how the loudest person in the room often feels like the most powerful? That's not true power. That's just noise. And toxic people, they're experts at making noise. Their strategy isn't to dominate through strength, it's to distract through chaos. They thrive on reaction. They push buttons not because they're curious about who you are, but because they want control over how you feel. And the moment you react, snap back, yell, get defensive, they win. Because now you're playing their game, but smart people, calm people, they play a different game altogether. You don't have to outshout a toxic person to outsmart them. In fact, the less you react, the more control you gain. See, keeping your cool isn't about pretending nothing bothers you. It's about choosing what's worth your energy. And toxic people? They're not. Not today. Not anymore. Here's what's interesting. When someone's being difficult, when they're poking at you, criticizing you, testing your patience, most people think the strong thing to do is fight back, assert yourself, prove them wrong. But that only entangles you in their story. That only validates their tactics. You're now co-starring in a drama they wrote for their own benefit. And your piece? That's the price of admission. Now don't confuse calm with passivity. This isn't about being a doormat. This is about being a wall. Unshakable, neutral, controlled. Because toxic people aren't actually after the win. They're after the reaction, the emotion, the fire. So when you deny them that, you take away their fuel. And slowly, quietly, they burn out. You ever seen someone try to fight with a person who refuses to engage? It's awkward. The tension falls flat. The toxic person gets louder, more sarcastic, more absurd. And the calm one? They stay composed. Not because they're weak, but because they're rooted, grounded. That's not suppression. That's power. Think about it. When someone's throwing emotional punches and you just let them swing at air, what happens? They get tired. They unravel, and eventually they reveal more about themselves than they ever did about you. Keeping your cool is an act of self-discipline. It's a decision to say, I don't owe you my peace just because you lost yours. It's waking up every day and deciding not to carry their chaos into your future. It's choosing presence over provocation. And it's a quiet kind of courage, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be strong. We live in a world that rewards reaction. Algorithms feed on outrage. Conversations are won by who shouts loudest. But in that noise, something powerful happens when someone stands still, listens carefully, and responds thoughtfully. That person stands out, not for their silence, but for their intention. You can't control the toxic people in your life. You can't stop them from crossing your path, saying things that sting, trying to shake your confidence. But you can control the temperature in the room. And the temperature of your mind, that's your domain. That's your power. And here's the truth. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loud one. It's the one who doesn't flinch. The one who doesn't need to prove anything. The one who chooses not to play a game that's rigged for drama. The one who knows, deep down, that peace isn't something you protect from others. It's something you protect within yourself. If you really want to outsmart a toxic person, don't match their intensity. Lower yours. Let them drown in their own noise while you rise in your own stillness. Because the smartest move you can ever make is to keep your peace when everything around you is trying to take it. There's a moment, usually early on, when we know something feels off. Maybe it's the way someone constantly pushes past what's comfortable. Maybe it's how they laugh at your expense or guilt you into things or cross lines you never gave them permission to cross. And you feel it, right? That little voice inside that says, this isn't okay. But instead of honoring that voice, we hesitate. We second guess ourselves. We rationalize. We think, maybe I'm overreacting. Or if I just explain it better, they'll understand. Here's the hard truth: toxic people don't respect explanations, they respect boundaries. See, boundaries aren't walls meant to shut people out. They're doors we get to open or close depending on who's earned the right to step in. And smart people, they don't wait until they're emotionally drained or completely burnt out to set those boundaries. They build them early, and they build them clearly. Ooh. One of the mistakes so many of us make is thinking we have to defend our boundaries, as if protecting our peace needs a permission slip, as if saying a no demands a 10-point presentation. But the smartest people, the ones who truly get it, they don't explain their boundaries to toxic people. They enforce them. And I want to say this directly because someone here needs to hear it. No is a complete sentence. You're allowed to say no to something that makes you uncomfortable. You're allowed to walk away from conversations that feel manipulative. You're allowed to choose silence over explanation, especially when you know the person asking doesn't want understanding. They want control. Now that might sound harsh, but let me flip it. Think about the people in your life who do respect you. Respect you. You don't have to constantly remind them of your boundaries, right? They notice, they listen, they care, they adjust. That's what healthy looks like. Toxic people don't lack hearing, they lack respect. So the more you try to justify your boundaries, the more you hand them tools to dismantle them. They'll poke holes in your logic. They'll make you feel guilty for drawing the line. They'll twist your words until you start believing you're the problem. But boundaries aren't up for debate. They're a reflection of self-worth. And if you're worried that setting boundaries makes you seem cold or distant, remember this: boundaries create space for connection. Healthy boundaries aren't the absence of love, they're the evidence of it. They say, I value myself enough to protect my energy, and I value you enough to be honest about what I need. That's not distance, that's clarity, that's maturity. Now, here's where this really ties into everything else we've been talking about. When you set a boundary and keep your cool while doing it, you're making a choice. You're choosing strength over struggle. You're choosing peace over performance. And most importantly, you're choosing yourself over their approval. The people who are meant to stay in your life won't be pushed away by your boundaries. They'll be drawn to them, because clarity attracts clarity. And the ones who don't like your limits, they were never planning to respect them anyway. You want to outsmart a toxic person? Draw the line, not with anger, not with guilt, just with quiet certainty. I don't accept being spoken to that way. I won't continue this conversation until it's respectful. I need time to myself right now. Say it once. Say it calmly. Say it without flinching. That's enough. Because you don't owe anyone access to your life just because they demand it loudly. You don't owe anyone closeness just because they used to be close. You don't owe an open door to someone who's proven they only walk through to rearrange the furniture and leave a mess. At the end of the day, boundaries are not barriers to connection, they're invitations to healthier relationships. But they're also a filter. They separate those who care enough to respect you from those who never intended to. So don't apologize for drawing the line. Don't explain it away. Don't shrink to make someone else comfortable. Just stand in it with calm, quiet confidence and let the line do its job. Because when you stop defending your boundaries, the right people start respecting them. It's incredibly tempting to engage when someone pushes your buttons. That moment when someone takes a shot at you, subtle or direct, and you feel your jaw tighten, your heart race. You want to say something. You want to set the record straight. You want to defend your name, your values, your dignity, your values, your dignity. That's human. But here's the thing: toxic people count on that impulse. They don't just want your attention, they need it. Because without your reaction, they lose their script. And that's what this is, by the way: a script. Toxic people operate from patterns, not principles. They bait. They provoke. They stir the pot, not because they're looking for truth, but because they're looking for control. And one of the most effective ways to gain control over someone is to get them emotionally invested in a problem that doesn't actually have a solution. You ever been in one of those arguments where the goalposts keep moving? You clarify one point, and they jump to something else. You answer their question, and they ask a new one with a sharper edge. Suddenly, you're explaining your tone, your motives, your past, you're drained, and they're energized. That's not a conversation. That's a setup. And you're not being heard, you're being played. But smart people, really smart people, don't take the bait. They observe, they listen, and they choose not to engage emotionally with someone who isn't there to understand, only to dominate. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying you should stay silent in the face of disrespect. I'm saying you should choose your response based on the outcome you value. Because if you value clarity, then yes, communicate. But if you're trying to get validation or resolution from someone who's not emotionally honest or safe, that's a losing battle. That's just bleeding energy into a bottomless pit. The power here lies in observation. When you observe instead of react, you give yourself space to see the pattern. You start to notice they interrupt when you're calm. They guilt trip when you're strong. They twist your words when you set a boundary. And once you see the pattern, you stop trying to change it, and you start navigating around it. Observation gives you back the power of choice. Next, instead of asking, why are they treating me this way? Which keeps you stuck, you start asking, why am I still allowing myself to be pulled into this? That shift changes everything. It's like being in the eye of a storm. All this chaos is happening around you. Accusations, drama, manipulation, and you're just standing there, still, quiet, watching. That's not passive. That's presence. That's presence. That's presence, that's strength. Because when you refuse to engage emotionally, something powerful happens. You don't feed their narrative. You don't dance to their rhythm. You don't allow them to dictate the tone of the moment. And in that silence, your silence, they're forced to face their own noise. Now, that might frustrate them. Toxic people hate losing their audience. They may escalate, get louder, more dramatic. But you stay grounded. You keep observing. You respond when necessary, but with intention, not impulse. This kind of restraint doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from self-respect. It says, I know who I am. I don't need to prove it to someone who's committed to misunderstanding me. And there's a subtle but important truth here. You don't win by beating a toxic person at their own game. You win by refusing to play it in the first place. Their game depends on chaos. Yours depends on clarity. So the next time someone pulls you into a heated, circular, pointless exchange, pause. Pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, is this person actually trying to find truth, or are they just trying to win? It says those are two very different goals, and only one of them is worth your time. And if it's not about truth, walk away, gracefully, quietly, firmly, gracefully, quietly. Not as a sign of weakness, but as a declaration of strength. Because sometimes the smartest thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes the strongest move you can make is simply not reacting. There's a moment after the damage has been done, after the manipulation, the lies, the subtle digs, that we start thinking about how to get even. It's natural. It's almost instinctual. Part of us wants to show that we're not weak, that we saw it, that we're not someone to be messed with. We think they deserve a taste of their own medicine. But here's what smart people know. Revenge might feel satisfying in the short term, but it ties you to the very energy you're trying to escape. When you plot your next move with someone toxic in mind, they're still in control. Well, just wearing a different mask. They've moved from your present into your mind, and that is exactly where they want to be. Outsmarting a toxic person doesn't mean outmaneuvering them. It doesn't mean teaching them a lesson. It doesn't even mean they realize they were wrong. Because, honestly, most of the time, they won't. They won't sit down one day and reflect deeply on their behavior. They won't send the apology you deserve. They won't suddenly develop emotional maturity. Waiting for that is like waiting for the storm to apologize for the rain. So what do smart people do instead? They redirect. Not toward the person, but inward. They don't spend their energy trying to tear someone down. They spend their energy building themselves up. Because that's the difference between retaliation and resilience. One keeps you in the story, the other sets you free from it. See, emotional distance is power. When you stop centering someone who thrives on chaos, you starve the drama. You take back your mental. When you don't fight back, when you don't explain, when you don't chase closure, you're not giving up. You're just stepping out of the loop. You're saying, this is not where my story evolves. This is where it ends. Think about this. Every moment you spend trying to fix or punish a toxic person is a moment you're not investing in your peace, your purpose, or your people. It's a form of emotional debt. You pay interest every day in frustration, overthinking, bitterness. But when you choose distance over drama, healing over hostility, you stop paying for what someone else broke. Letting go isn't giving up on justice. It's refusing to let injustice ruin you. And that's hard. Because sometimes the pain is personal. It's not just about what happened, it's about who did it. It's about trust that was betrayed, vulnerability that was used, time that was wasted. And you think, they don't get to walk away from that. They need to feel it. But here's the quiet truth. They probably won't. Not in the way you want them to. And even if they did, would it really give you peace? Or would it just keep you locked in the same emotional cycle, waiting for one more sign, one more validation? Smart people don't waste time orchestrating karma. Men, they trust that life has a way of revealing what's real. And in the meantime, they're busy getting stronger, not bitter. They build new routines. They focus on work that matters. They invest in relationships that feel safe. They write new chapters without waiting for closure from the last one. Because nothing bothers a toxic person more than being ignored, than being irrelevant, than being completely unfazed by the games they used to win. And nothing honors your growth more than deciding, this doesn't deserve another second of my energy. It's easy to think that if you don't fight back, they win. But here's the twist. Fighting back is their win, because it means they still have access to you. It means they still live in your thoughts, influence your decisions, guide your behavior. Distance ends that. Detachment isn't cold. It's clean. It's not the absence of emotion. It's the refusal to hand your emotion over to someone who never handled it with care in the first place. So if you're tempted to get even, pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, oh, will this move lead me closer to peace or deeper into chaos? And then choose accordingly. Because every step you take away from the noise is a step back toward yourself. You want to outsmart a toxic person?
Don't match their damage. Surpass it with your healing. Let them thin. Let them fade.
Because the real victory isn't making them hurt. It's making sure they no longer have the power to hurt you. One of the smartest things you can do in any relationship, especially when it starts to feel tense or confusing, is to stop listening to the words for a moment and start paying attention to the patterns. Because words can lie. Words can sound convincing, even sincere. Toxic people are often skilled communicators. They know how to say the right thing at the right time to diffuse tension, to reset your doubt, to pull you back in just when you're about to walk away. They don't say, I'm going to manipulate you now. What they say is, or just too sensitive. Or imagining things. Or worse, if you really cared, you'd understand me. And if you take those words at face value, if you try to argue with them, explain yourself, rationalize your boundaries, you'll get pulled deeper and deeper into a maze that's designed to keep you lost. Because the moment you try to make emotional sense of manipulation, you've already given it more credit than it deserves. But patterns? Patterns never lie. A toxic person might apologize, but do they change? They might promise to be better, but does their behavior follow through? They might say they respect you, but do they keep crossing your boundaries? This is where smart people shift their focus. Instead of getting stuck in the language, they start looking at the rhythm. Not what someone says, but how often they say it. Not how they act in one moment, but how they consistently show up or fail to. Because consistency is the clearest sign of character. When someone shows you who they are repeatedly, believe it. Not the first time, maybe not even the second. But by the third, fourth, or fifth pattern, it's not an accident anymore. It's a strategy. Here's something we don't talk about enough. Some people don't want connection, they want control. And control doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's subtle, a guilt trip here, a backhanded compliment there, a backhanded compliment there, a little silence when you say something they don't like. And then later, kindness, warmth, a nice message, a gift. It's confusing. It creates emotional whiplash. And that's the point. Because if they can keep you unsure, they can keep you attached. If they can make you question yourself, they never have to question their own behavior. And over time, that confusion becomes your baseline. You stop trusting your gut. You start rationalizing their behavior. You shrink yourself to avoid setting them off. But when you start looking at patterns, you take back your clarity. You start seeing things for what they are, not for what you hope they could be. Maybe they always have a crisis when you're busy. Maybe they always blame someone else when something goes wrong. Maybe they always play the victim until you try to hold them accountable. That's not bad luck. That's not bad timing. That's a pattern. And it matters. This is why observing behavior is so powerful, because it gives you data. It takes the emotion out of the moment and gives you something real to work with. Every time I express a need, they punish me with distance. That's not dramatic. That's evidence. Evidence. They say they care, but when I need support, they disappear. That's not petty. That's a pattern. And once you see the pattern, you have a choice. You don't have to confront it with rage or make some grand declaration. You can just stop participating in it. Quietly, clearly, consistently. You don't need their agreement to know what's true. You don't need their permission to trust what you've seen. And you don't need their validation to walk away from something that's been hurting you. This kind of clarity doesn't come overnight. It comes from getting quiet with yourself, from reflecting on how you feel around them, from noticing how often you're confused, how often you're drained, how often you're questioning your own reality. And then slowly, gently, you start taking your power back, not by changing them, but by recognizing them. Because when you can name a pattern, you're no longer confused by it. And when you're no longer confused, you stop reacting. You stop justifying. You stop needing their story to make sense. You let it be what it is, and you decide what you want to do with it. That's how smart people win. Not through confrontation, through recognition, through awareness, through quiet, grounded choices that there's this exhausting trap a lot of us fall into when we're dealing with toxic people. We start centering them. We wake up thinking about what they said. We replay conversations in our heads, wondering if we were too harsh or not harsh enough. We check our phones expecting another passive-aggressive message, or maybe some fake kindness to keep us off balance. And slowly, without even realizing it, we start organizing our thoughts, our moods, even our self-worth, around them. But smart people don't play that game. They understand that the goal is not to win the toxic person over. It's not to fix them. It's not to finally say the perfect thing that makes them realize what they've done, because that's a distraction. A loop. And the more time you spend running around that loop, the less energy you have for you, your clarity, your goals, your growth. See, toxic people want your attention more than they want your respect. They're not always trying to be liked, they're trying to be centered. Even your frustration is a kind of loyalty, because as long as you're reacting to them, you're still dancing to their rhythm. But here's the truth. You don't owe them a front row seat in your life just because they keep showing up with noise. Smart people reclaim that space. They pull their focus inward not in a selfish way, but in a deeply strategic way. They stop trying to control the uncontrollable and start pouring energy into what they can build. Their habits, their relationships, their peace, their purpose. Because the best way to disarm a toxic influence isn't to confront it over and over again, it's to evolve so far beyond it that it simply can't follow you anymore. You ever notice how quiet your mind gets when you're doing something that feeds your soul? Oh, maybe it's a project you care about or spending time with someone who makes you feel seen. In those moments, you're not replaying arguments. You're not crafting comebacks. You're not walking on emotional eggshells. You're just present. That's the zone where toxic people lose their grip because you're no longer anchored to their chaos. That's why redirecting your energy inward isn't avoidance. It's survival. It's strength. You're not ignoring the problem. You're just refusing to make it the center of your life anymore. And when you start doing this, something shifts. You stop feeling the need to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop obsessing over what they're thinking, how they'll react, whether they'll change. You start showing up for yourself. You start saying, what do I need to feel grounded today? Or what kind of energy do I want to carry into this room? Or what am I building with my time? Because time is the one resource we don't get back. And every minute you give to someone who drains you is a minute you're not giving to someone who values you or to yourself. Now, this doesn't mean you never think about them again. Healing is not amnesia. It's not pretending nothing happened. It's remembering without reacting. It's being able to say, yes, that hurt. But no, it doesn't own me anymore. That's where your power is. Not in erasing the past, but in refusing to let it shape your future. So if you've been giving too much space in your mind to someone who only causes confusion, it's okay to pull that space back. To pull that space back, you don't need permission. You don't need a dramatic exit. You just need one quiet decision to start building a life they don't get to shape. Because ultimately, this isn't about them. It's about you. It's about how you want to live. It's about who you want to become. And toxic people will always resist that. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your growth reminds them they've stopped growing. Your peace threatens their chaos. Your boundaries expose their lack of respect. Your clarity makes their manipulation visible. And they don't like that. But that's not your problem to solve. Your job is to rise. Not loudly, not perfectly, but steadily. To put your energy back into your own hands. To build your own path with intention, with peace, with purpose. Because in the end, the smartest way to outgrow a toxic person is to become someone they simply can't reach anymore. And when you do that, their power ends, not because they changed, but because you did. So let's get one thing clear. Outsmarting a toxic person doesn't mean playing their game better. It means refusing to play it at all. It means keeping your cool when they want you to explode, drawing boundaries without apology, observing their patterns instead of believing their words. Choosing detachment over revenge, redirecting your energy inward, and most of all, it means remembering that your peace, your growth, and your integrity are not negotiable. Toxic people may try to shake you, confuse you, provoke you, but if you stay rooted, they lose access to what they never truly earned. You don't need to win them over. You just need to stop giving them a front row seat in a life they were never meant to lead. Because the real power isn't in fighting the toxic. It's in becoming so grounded, so clear, and so calm that they simply can't touch you anymore.